Hello, AP World History students, and welcome to part 2 of the review of Units 3 and 4. The transformation of Europe economics. We have both new ideologies and labor systems emerged during this time. Adam Smith was a proponent of capitalism. Basically, he described something called the invisible hand, and that both demand and supply would be controlled by individuals and by private industry, and by doing that, by letting private industry determine what should be produced, and how to produce it efficiently and with the quality that they want, and then consumers bringing a demand to whatever is being produced, that this would elevate and increase economic wealth. Also, there was a concept called mercantilism that was popular at that time as well. And this is where a country, and this is closely aligned with capitalism, attempts to amass wealth through trade with other countries. And what they want to do is export, in other words, sell to other countries more that it imports. And it also wants to increase its stores of gold and precious metals. So we're going to see in the years to come through this unit that the idea of getting gold, getting silver is going to become really important in European countries in particular. We've already talked about what joint stock companies are. They continue to grow in their popularity. In Europe, we see the emergence of the putting out system. This is a picture of the putting out system. In this system, the raw materials, the cotton, the looms, the weaving, all of this would go out and be in like a countryside home, so that the full manufacturing process takes place in one area. Of course, this is going to be replaced by the factory system later on, but the putting out system became a very popular means of production in Europe during the time period that we're talking about. We still have serfdom in Russia. There are a class of nobles that are wealthy, and then there are a class of very, very poor people who are serfs, who are not unlike slaves in the Americas, which we'll be talking about in just a few minutes. All right, next slide, if I can get to it. Okay, political systems. European countries start to centralize control. We see the institution of monarchies continue, but there are actually two types of monarchies. So first of all, we have constitutional monarchies. In a constitutional monarchy, the monarch is subject to constitutional limitations of power. They are the head monarch, so to speak, the king and queen or king or whichever it may be. However, they need to comply with the parliament, with the constitution that's been set out by their countries. The Dutch had a constitutional monarchy, and in particular, the trading companies actually had a lot of power in the Dutch constitutional monarchy. In England, we have the English Bill of Rights signed in 1689. This was a pretty big deal. I mean, it guaranteed freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to question the king and queen, and in fact was the predecessor of the United States of America's own Bill of Rights that became part of our Constitution. Absolute monarchies still continue to rule with absolute power. And the best two examples of absolute monarchies are, of course, in France. We have Louis XIV, the Sun King, was an absolute ruler. He spent lots and lots of money building this lavish palace at Versailles. If you've ever been there, if you go there someday, you'll be just like amazed, because it's so huge and it's so beautiful, while kind of ignoring the needs of his subjects. And in Russia, we have Peter the Great coming into power in 1613 with the Romanov dynasty. He is also an absolute ruler. The Romanov dynasty will be the last dynasty in Russia, imperial dynasty, and it will become in the 1900s a communist country. The Christian Reformations are huge. It's hard to describe how big of a change this was for Europe, because remember, during the Middle Ages, the religious unity is what got people through, and the Roman Catholic Church was absolutely the head of the church in Western Europe. We're talking about Western Europe here. So first of all, we have the Protestant Reformation. This began in 1517 in Wittenberg, Germany, by Martin Luther. So as the story goes, he nailed 95 theses on the door of the church at Wittenberg, and he argues several points of theology with the Roman Catholic Church for which he disagrees. His story is incredibly interesting, and hopefully you got to get something from it when we talked about it in class. But he was especially critical of indulgences. Now, these were payments that people made to have their sins absolved. So keep in mind, people really, really believed that they had to have their sins absolved by a priest in order to, first of all, escape from purgatory, and secondly, go to heaven after they die. And so Luther was just disgusted by these indulgences. What it did was it made the church very rich, and it led to the building of very lavish cathedrals and things like that. But it really didn't help people. And in fact, Luther felt like people were being really inhibited by these rules of the Catholic Church, and that they were feeling scared for their eternal destiny. So the new followers of Luther are called Protestants. The root word here is protest. They're protesting the Catholic Church. Many other offshoots would come for this. This would include John Calvin and the Huguenots. Calvinists would be popular in England and Scotland, and eventually lead to the Presbyterian Church. The Huguenots were popular in France. Now, I'm sorry that some of the text here is cut off, but I think you can hopefully catch on to what I'm talking about. The Catholic Reformation then occurs as a response to the Reformation. They realize that too many people are pulling away from the Catholic Church, and in fact, there were people that agreed with Luther that the Catholic Church had indeed become corrupt. And so the Council of Trent convened over several summers from 1545 to 1563. They even invited reformers to join in the Council of Trent. And so the goal of the Council of Trent was to reform the Catholic Church and curb the corruption, especially corruption by the priest. New orders were formed. The Society of Jesus, called the Jesuits, they emphasized a comprehensive education and missionary activity. The Catholic Church also, however, increased Inquisition trials, especially in Spain. People would be pulled in, they would be tried to see if they were heretical, if they were teaching anything against the Catholic Church, and many people were actually being burned at the stake or executed for having what were believed to be heretical ideas. Now, the English Reformation occurred in 1560. So now King Henry, he's got this wife, and she's not having a male baby, so he wants to have this male heir really, really badly. And so what does he do? He says, hey, Catholic Church, Pope, I want to have an annulment of my marriage or divorce because I'm not getting this male heir. And Catholic Church says, nope, not giving you a divorce. Divorce is against the Catholic Church. So he says, well, you know what? That's okay. I'm a king. I'm going to start my own church. So the English Reformation really was the beginning of the Anglican Church, which is called by the Episcopalian Church here in the United States and Canada. So what happens as a result of the Reformation? There are so many conflicts. Certain princes are like, hey, I don't want to be under the Catholic Church anymore. I think I'm going to follow this Protestant church. And then others are like, no, I gotta be loyal to the Catholic Church. And what happens is a huge amount of power struggles. The 30 Years' War took place from 1618 to 1648, involved a number of battles, and it was, at its root about power and about religion, and it actually led to the death of 1/3 of the German population. What finally ended the 30 Years' War was the Peace of Westphalia. This was designed to bring balance of power to competing European states, and if one European state would become too big or strong, then alliances would be formed. It didn't end war between European states, and certainly we're going to see that in the 20th century, but it did establish the era of a sovereign state. Okay, so what's happening in Europe as far as science? Discoveries in science, new ideas, and the idea of enlightenment brought huge changes of thought and scientific discovery into Europe. First of all, astronomy, um, which was dominated by this idea of the Ptolemaic universe. Ptolemy was way back in time, way back to the time of Alexander the Great, and this was an idea that the Earth was the center of the universe, and um, and that everything revolved around the Earth. Now we have this idea of the Copernican universe, and Copernicus, through his study of astronomy, realizes that the sun is the center of the universe, and rather that the universe is heliocentric. As it turns out, he is right, but the Catholic Church originally did not like this idea very well. Now, the scientific revolution occurs during this time, and during this time, they actually brought back some of the Aristotelian ideas about the scientific method, and that we can prove things through the scientific method through having a hypothesis, a theory, a method of testing, and then proof of the principles that we are trying to describe. So this knowledge had been preserved, as you might recall, by the Islamic world, and then it was translated by monks and rediscovered, so to speak, during the Middle Ages. Galileo invented the telescope, and he sees now that the universe is much larger than had ever been imagined in the past. The Catholic Church determines he is a heretic. Okay, he's put on house arrest for the remainder of his life. Now, he could wander around his house. This is true, and he was actually, in my lifetime, he was actually, his title of heretic was taken away from him, so he's no longer considered a heretic of the Catholic Church. Newton described the law of universal gravitation. This would be a really important law for physics moving forward. Now let's talk about the Enlightenment. Also, a really huge development in Europe. And this promoted the idea of reason and science to the humanities. So how are we able to understand human behavior? Let's apply the principles of science to human behavior. Some people may not know this, but the Enlightenment actually provided some of the ideas that would end up forming the foundation of the discipline of psychology as we empirically study the notions of both human behavior and cognitive thought. Now, Voltaire was a huge critic of the Catholic Church during the period of the Enlightenment. He thought that the Catholic Church took advantage of people, and it wasn't that he was anti-God, so to speak, but in his book Candide, he writes a satire about the Catholic Church, and you can really see that he is very, very against the Catholic Church. This idea of deism emerges during this time period of the Enlightenment, and so the idea comes about that God is like a clockmaker. Okay, so the universe is this giant clock, and he set it in motion, and then he stepped back and he just let events happen the way that they are going to happen. So this idea of deism is really important, both in Europe, and it will go to the Americas as well. All right, let's take a look at the Americas, the New World. Okay, so the Spanish, they get out there, they got their ships, and Columbus reaches the Caribbean in 1492. In the early 1500s, Cortes conquers the Aztecs. They are in modern day Mexico, and they have a Spanish administration that is in the form of audiencias and viceroys who serve the king in Spain. So really, they were a Spanish colony. They utilized what's called the encomienda system for forced labor. So basically, when a conquistador would go to the Americas, they were allowed by the government to take natives and make them labor in either mines or in agriculture. Pizarro was the person who conquers the Incas. In the Incas, you might recall they had the Midas system. This was where they gave 1/7 of their time to labor for the Inca Emperor. They used the same system the Spanish do in having especially the Inca work in silver mines. and also in agriculture. The two biggest silver mines were at Potosi, that is in South America, and at Zacatecas, which is in modern-day Mexico. And this provides great wealth for the Spanish Empire and becomes the international trade currency. These mountains were basically made of silver. It's really fascinating. If you don't remember it, look it up. It's really cool. Okay, I'll see you on the next video.